This man's name is Bruno. He is a brilliant surgeon, known for successfully completing every operation without a single failure. Bruno has a wife named Sylvie and a young daughter named Jasmine. One day, Jasmine asks Bruno to help her to deliver invitations for her upcoming birthday party, which is planned for 2 weeks later. She also asks him to take her to school. But Bruno, exhausted after performing surgery all night, reluctantly turns her down. Jasmine says she'll go on her own and leaves for school. Bruno falls asleep while Sylvie has already left for work. He sleeps so deeply that he doesn't even notice the home phone ringing multiple times. Later, after waking up and going about his day, Bruno is visited by one of Jasmine's classmates who drops off a homework book for her. The classmate mentions that Jasmine didn't come to school today. Hearing this, Bruno immediately becomes worried. He calls out her name, hoping she's already home, but there's no answer. Even as night falls and Sylvie returns home, Jasmine still doesn't come back. Their anxiety quickly turns into deep fear. We are then introduced to a detective named Hervé. He watches an old surveillance video showing the tragic moment his wife is shot by an armed robber at a convenience store. Although the incident happened some time ago, Hervé still carries the emotional weight of that loss. The next day, Hervé receives a missing child report. The child is Jasmine. He visits Bruno and Sylvie's home to ask for her physical description. With the needed information, police officers, along with Bruno, begin a search, starting with places Jasmine usually visits, but they find no clues at all. Eventually, after searching for a long time, one of the officers discovers Jasmine. Tragically, she is already dead. The officers try to stop Bruno from seeing the body because of its horrifying condition, but he insists. When he sees Jasmine covered in injuries, he is devastated. What completely breaks him is the sight of blood in her intimate area, indicating that she was raped before she died. That reality crushes Bruno's heart. The cheerful little girl he loved more than anything has met a horrific end. Back at home, Bruno tells Sylvie about Jasmine's condition. Just like him, Sylvie is overwhelmed with sorrow. Both of them seem to lose all sense of their work or daily responsibilities. All they can do is wait for further updates from the police as they search for the suspect. A few days later, Bruno receives a call from Hervé. The police have identified the suspect through DNA taken from semen found on Jasmine's body. Hervé explains that the suspect is being held at the police station and will stand trial in 1 week. Soon after, the media surrounds the suspect, a man named Anthony. Reporters explain that it didn't take long for the police to arrest him. Watching from the television, Bruno and Sylvie are consumed by rage, especially when Anthony smiles in front of the camera. It's the smile of a pedophile who shows no remorse, and it fuels a deep, burning hatred within Bruno. The next day, Bruno tells Sylvie that he wants to go to work to help himself feel better. But instead of heading to the hospital, he spends the day driving around. Eventually, he finds a secluded cabin in the middle of the forest. He breaks in and inspects the place, thinking it's exactly what he needs. He starts planning something, though it's not yet clear what. He even hires a handyman to build him some custom tools and equipment. Bruno goes as far as paying a young man a large amount of money to assist with whatever he's preparing to do. Exactly 1 week later, just as Anthony is about to be taken to court, a young man breaks into a parking area and places something inside the vehicle that will transport Anthony. He then stands by, silently watching the car until it drives away. During the trip, the vehicle suddenly stops when the officer driving it passes out. Bruno, who has been tailing them from a distance, approaches the officer and introduces himself as a doctor offering help. He then carries the unconscious officer out of the car. Without hesitation, Bruno drives off with the vehicle. The driver likely passes out because the young man Bruno hired has tampered with the steering wheel and applied a certain substance that triggers unconsciousness. Bruno wears gloves while driving to avoid direct skin contact with the substance. Bruno then stops in a remote area, sedates Anthony, and switches vehicles with one he has prepared beforehand. Meanwhile, the police secure the scene of the car theft. Detective Hervé finds Bruno's identification document inside the abandoned car, clearly left there on purpose, signaling to everyone that Bruno has taken the man who murdered his daughter. At the cabin deep in the woods, Bruno chains Anthony naked to a butcher's table. This marks the beginning of an ongoing nightmare for Anthony. Bruno's eyes burn with fury as he faces the man who raped and killed his daughter. Anthony slowly regains consciousness, disoriented by the terrifying surroundings and by the presence of a man he doesn't recognize. But without a single word, Anthony realizes who this man is, the father of the girl he murdered. Fear replaces his earlier defiance, and Anthony begins to plead for mercy. He swears he's not the killer. Bruno grows furious. The DNA evidence is undeniable, yet Anthony continues to lie and make excuses. Instead of showing remorse, he spins lies, and Bruno responds accordingly. Not satisfied with simply breaking his knees, Bruno escalates the torment. That night, with darkness blanketing the woods, Bruno forces Anthony to stand on one leg, his other leg too swollen and painful to use. His neck is tied to a rope from above, leaving him unable to sit without choking. It's a cruel and brilliant method designed to cause relentless pain. Anthony screams throughout the night, but Bruno leaves him alone, ending day one of the torment. Day 2 begins as Detective Hervé visits Bruno's house to gather any information Sylvie can provide. He even asks Sylvie to cooperate by allowing the police to tap her phone in case Bruno calls. Reluctantly, she agrees. Meanwhile, Bruno wakes Anthony by urinating on his face. Then he steps on Anthony's swollen foot, causing him to scream in pain and rage. Bruno takes a break outside and comes across a deer carcass. He cuts some meat from it to feed Anthony. He doesn't want him to die of hunger just yet. Bruno stores the meat and leaves, while Anthony devours it hungrily, unaware it comes from a rotting deer carcass. Elsewhere, Bruno watches the news reporting that he is now a suspect in Anthony's abduction. Bruno shows no surprise, he almost welcomes it. To him, it confirms that the world knows a pedophile like Anthony deserves punishment. Even Hervé's colleague, Michel, accidentally voices support, saying he would cut off Anthony's penis if it were his own daughter. At the same time, Sylvie receives a call from Bruno, one that Hervé listens to live due to the wiretap. Bruno tells her he broke Anthony's knees yesterday, and that this is only the beginning. While Bruno stands firm in his mission for vengeance, Sylvie begs him to stop and come home. She, too, can't accept how Jasmine died, but she knows Bruno's actions won't bring their daughter back. Bruno, however, doesn't care. In his mind, he owes Jasmine a debt that can only be paid in pain by hurting the man who destroyed her. Detective Hervé cuts into the conversation and urges Bruno to surrender. He tells Bruno that if he cooperates, he might receive a lighter sentence. But once again, Bruno isn't surprised to hear Hervé's voice suddenly appear on the line. He already knows the police are tapping his wife's phone. What's more, Bruno begins to play with Hervé's mind right then and there. We know that Hervé's wife was shot and killed by a robber at a convenience store, and ever since, he's been consumed by grief, obsessively replaying the footage of her murder, unable to accept her death. Bruno calls Hervé a foolish husband for locking up the man who killed his wife. Deep down, Bruno says Hervé also longs for true revenge, but now it's too late. Hervé falls silent. As a detective, he knows the killer should be punished by the law. But as a husband, he can't accept what happened. Frustrated and haunted by Bruno's words, he hangs up and returns home, sinking deeper into his own sorrow. Back at the cabin, Bruno now hangs Anthony by his arms. Anthony yells and threatens Bruno, swearing that he'll get revenge once he's free. Bruno calmly picks up a weapon, making Anthony break down in tears. But it's only a bluff. The weapon is just to scare him. Bruno has no intention of letting his daughter's killer die so easily. On the third day, Bruno finds the deer carcass in even worse condition. Once again, he cuts a piece of meat to feed Anthony. Meanwhile, at the police station, investigators finally track down the two men who helped Bruno during the abduction. One built the torture tools, and the other was the young man who sabotaged the vehicle meant to transport Anthony to court. Surprisingly, both men confess. They admit to helping Bruno after being paid well, but insist they never knew what his true plan was or where he went. Because of their honesty, the police decide to release them, seeing them as cooperative. Bruno never asked them to stay silent under interrogation. He doesn't care. He wants the world to know that he kidnapped the man who murdered his daughter, and that he's hiding in a remote cabin the police will never find. Back at the cabin, Anthony starts to feel something's wrong with the food he's been eating. Realizing it's rotting meat, he says something disgustingly vile, claiming Jasmine's genitals were more delicious than the carcass. Bruno explodes. He beats Anthony over and over with a chain until he passes out, his rage turning him into a monster completely out of control. Meanwhile, Detective Hervé and his team grow increasingly desperate in their search for Bruno. They report that every home connected to Bruno has been checked, and every hotel they visited still leads to nothing. Frustrated, Michel wonders aloud why they are even going to such lengths. After all, Bruno is just a grieving father seeking justice for the man who harmed his daughter. On the fourth day, Bruno sits silently, watching Anthony, who is weak and badly hurt. Not wanting him to die too soon, Bruno decides to keep him alive. He uses a stethoscope to check on Anthony's condition and sets up an IV drip. Despite being in poor shape, Anthony continues to insult and threaten him, but Bruno remains silent and composed. Bruno considers feeding Anthony again using deer meat, but the carcass has decomposed too much. Disgusted, he disposes of it in the lake. It seems Anthony will have to go without food today. That night, Bruno watches a TV interview featuring his wife. A reporter asks Sylvie about her thoughts on Bruno, who has gone viral for kidnapping their daughter's attacker. Sylvie responds by saying she doesn't support his actions and believes he's let his anger take over. She then walks away from the interview. Hearing her statement, Bruno grows even more upset. They argue over the phone, a call being monitored by the police, who hope to track him down. Sylvie blames Bruno, saying he's lost touch with reality and left her to deal with the media. Bruno also blames Sylvie for initiating physical intimacy with him while their child is in danger. Later, the police manage to trace an address connected to Bruno, but when they arrive, he's already gone, back to the isolated cabin in the woods. There, Anthony continues to hurl insults at him. Bruno says nothing, remaining calm and composed. Then, Bruno shows Anthony a small bottle and explains that the liquid inside is a substance designed to paralyze the body while keeping the mind fully aware of the pain and everything happening. His message is clear and chilling. Anthony will remember every moment for the rest of his life. Bruno prepares the equipment, places a photograph of Jasmine nearby, and says quietly that this is not about revenge. It's about making sure Anthony understands the pain he caused. What follows is not shown in detail, but we understand that Bruno carries out a disturbing plan meant to leave a lasting impact, emotionally and physically. After playing around, Bruno proceeds with his main goal, which is brutal and extremely cruel. He pulls out the large intestine, which functions to remove waste, then modifies and attaches it to a cut or hole he previously made. If Anthony tries to defecate later, the waste will exit through his waist, causing him unbearable pain. Bruno takes his revenge in an inhumane way, turning Anthony into the subject of his grotesque masterpiece. Bruno keeps a photo of Jasmine on Anthony's body so he can hurt him without a trace of pity, remembering what Anthony did to his daughter. At this point, Bruno's actions stray far from his profession as a doctor, making him appear more like a terrifying monster. On the fifth day, Bruno is seen boiling water to make coffee. At the same time, he hears Anthony scream in pain, an indication that the paralysis is starting to wear off. Bruno walks over to check on him. But when he sees Anthony, something inside him feels off. Breathing heavily, Anthony asks, "What are you going to do next?" Almost taunting him, he says he's curious about what Bruno will come up with, claiming that Bruno doesn't even seem to enjoy any of it. Bruno walks away in silence. He starts drinking, trying to numb the emotional weight pressing down on him. He questions his own actions and motives. That strange feeling in his chest grows stronger, a sign that Bruno doesn't truly take satisfaction in what he's doing. He's just an ordinary man, overwhelmed by anger, dragged into darkness by grief. Later, he returns to Anthony's room to administer fluids. But then, Anthony says something unexpected. He offers Bruno more information, telling him that Jasmine wasn't the only girl he assaulted and killed. There were three others: Marion, Lori, and Charlotte. For a moment, Bruno stands still, shocked by what he hears. Anthony continues, revealing their names and describing them in a cruel and remorseless way. It's unclear why he confesses, but one thing is certain: he is a predator. That night, Bruno calls a TV network and shares what Anthony has confessed. After disclosing the names of the other victims, he also contacts Detective Hervé to inform him about Anthony's crimes. While Hervé listens carefully, the police use the call to trace Bruno's location. It leads them to a house only 50 meters away from the police station. Officers rush to the location, but once inside, they find no one, only a laptop, rigged to reroute connections and mislead the trace. Bruno has tricked them again. At that moment, Bruno ends the call with Hervé. He's on the road, driving. Realizing his gas tank is nearly empty, he stops at a gas station and heads into a nearby convenience store. The cashier greets him, but Bruno says nothing. He grabs a drink, fully aware that the woman keeps glancing at him as if she recognizes him. She does. At the checkout, she realizes who he is, the doctor, all over the news. But instead of alerting the authorities, she leans forward and whispers words of support. She commends him for capturing the man who hurt his daughter. Bruno gives a faint smile, saying nothing. For once, he feels seen, not as a criminal, but as a father. On the sixth day, Michel grows frustrated and humiliated by Bruno's ability to mislead the police. His initial sympathy fades, replaced by a growing determination to catch Bruno as soon as possible. After long discussions and gathering input from field officers and informants, the team begins narrowing their focus to a large forested area. While the chances of locating Bruno there are slim, Hervé believes it's their best lead, especially knowing how clever Bruno has been at staying ahead of them. Meanwhile, Bruno watches the television program he called The Day Before. The show now airs interviews with the parents of the girls Anthony murdered. Marion and Lori's parents express full support for Bruno's actions, even hoping he punishes Anthony harshly. However, Charlotte's mother disagrees. She says that what Bruno is doing serves no purpose and won't change anything. Her daughter is long gone, she explains, and she has chosen to move on with her life. Bruno laughs bitterly at her words, but deep down, he's angry. He can't understand how a mother who lost her child could speak so calmly, as if she never felt the pain. That anger builds again, and this time, he decides to target Charlotte's mother. With his usual cunning, it doesn't take long for Bruno to find her. The scene shifts to Diane, Charlotte's mother, who has just returned home. She's puzzled when she hears the faucet turn on and off by itself, but dismisses it and sits down to relax. Meanwhile, Bruno watches his own car from a distance, parked by the street near Diane's house. Seeing too many people around, he decides to quietly leave in Diane's vehicle instead. Diane later wakes up in the cabin, confused and terrified to find Bruno there. Without wasting time, Bruno confronts her, accusing her of being hypocritical and disgusting for what she said on TV. He forces her to face Anthony. Though she struggles and refuses to look at the man who murdered her daughter, she's no match for Bruno's strength. Eventually, she's forced to see Anthony, now filthy, weak, and humiliated. Bruno mocks her and hands her a sledgehammer, telling her to take revenge for Charlotte. It becomes clear that Bruno's real purpose is to prove she isn't as forgiving as she claims, to show her what a grieving parent should do. He locks her in the room with Anthony, hoping she'll change her mind and do what he believes is right. An hour passes. When Bruno returns, Diane is sitting quietly, refusing to harm Anthony. Her inaction proves her earlier words weren't lies. As Bruno drinks again to quiet his thoughts, Diane walks to the window and looks out at the lake. Softly, she speaks to Bruno, telling him she's let go of the man who took her daughter. It was painful and took time, but she believes Bruno can do the same. She tells him that by forcing her to come here and face Anthony, he has just destroyed her peace, almost as if killing her daughter a second time. Diane urges Bruno to stop. In her view, every time he tortures Anthony, he's also hurting Jasmine all over again. Bruno, drunk and emotionally unstable, later dumps Diane unconscious in front of a stranger's house. Failing to make her seek revenge leaves him broken. In his haze, he foolishly parks Diane's car on a roadside path leading directly to the cabin. He holds his weapon and reflects on Diane's words. How could a parent be so composed, even offering him advice? Bruno's mind spirals, full of doubt and confusion. Meanwhile, Diane regains consciousness and flags down a passing car, asking to be taken to the police. At the station, she tells them everything Bruno did to her, including his location: a secluded cabin deep in the woods by the edge of a lake. Detective Hervé isn't surprised. The forest has been a point of interest for some time. This time, he's sure Bruno won't escape. On the seventh day, a patrol officer searches the area for cabins. After hours of looking, he spots a car parked along the road, suggesting Bruno is nearby. Inside the cabin, Bruno lies passed out from drinking. When he wakes, he starts drinking again, overwhelmed by emotion. He's a man who seems to have lost all direction. Suddenly, he begins hallucinating. He sees Jasmine, his daughter, standing silently, just as she looked the last time he saw her. Pale, wounded, her wrists still bound. He approaches her gently, embraces her, and leads her to the bathroom. He unties her hands and smiles, believing for a moment that she's really back. He even bathes her, tenderly cleaning her injuries, lost in the illusion of joy. It's the happiest moment Bruno has had since losing his only daughter. He promises never to let her go again. But that joy is short-lived. The illusion fades. Jasmine is gone. Reality hits. She will never return to his arms. Bruno breaks down in tears, realizing that no matter how hard he tries, the only real path forward is letting her go. He then sits beside Anthony, now barely conscious, and unlocks his handcuffs. For the first time, Bruno speaks directly to him. He tells Anthony that today is Jasmine's birthday. Outside, Hervé and the police arrive ready to breach the cabin. Bruno knows this is the end. With no way out, he holds a gun to his own head, torn between surrender and silence. Hervé shouts for Bruno to come out and give himself up. He repeats the command several times, but Bruno doesn't respond. Just as Hervé is about to break in, Bruno surrenders himself. The officers arrest him on charges of kidnapping and attempted murder. Meanwhile, Bruno tells Hervé that he didn't kill Anthony. A reporter at the scene asks if revenge is the right solution and whether Bruno regrets what he did. Bruno simply replies, "No."